Hey people, this is another time lapse. And I just want to talk about a few things. First of all, to start off with your paintings, I get this all the time from students. How do you paint something? Well, there's lots of different ways to paint something. But if you want a general principle to follow and be able to paint anything, I recommend painting general to specific. Students tend to start off and they go, I need to start with this nose or this eye and paint it. And there was an artist friend of mine that told me they recommend paint what you see first, last. So if you want people to look at an eye or something, then that's the last thing that you paint. And students tend to have a hard time doing that. So in this painting, I'm just kind of starting off with a good, simple lay-in. What do my shapes look like? You saw the drawing at the beginning. And I just jumped in and started adding some color. Now, I'm not so concerned about the exact or right color. I just want to get it in the general ballpark, because once I get it in the ballpark, it's pretty easy to refine. Here, I've just laid in color for the entire painting, and this is the general lay-in. So simple shapes, I have some shadow shapes, I have some light shapes, I have the general proportions of everything, and now is the time when I start to go in and work on rendering out form. But if I don't have all this information in there, it's really hard to be able to describe or turn the form that I'm seeing. So here you see on this persimmon, I love persimmons. No, did I tell you that I have an orchard? I have 7 different varieties of persimmons in my orchard, and I need to get some of them. But anyways, this persimmon that I started work on is very simple shapes, light shapes versus shadow shapes, and they're relatively orange and red in the shadows. When I shift over to the persimmon, it's a little bit more complex because it's sitting on top of a brick, and that brick is a very light valued brick, so it's reflecting up into it. So those shadows, the reflected light in the shadows, need to be colder or more blue and slightly lighter in value because that white is reflecting into it. But as I get into the refinement of this pomegranate that is sitting on this brick, that's the main thing that I was trying to focus on, and also texture. So I found out that if I use a bristle fan brush, I can get some really good striations of texture in that pomegranate. Now the brick. This brick, very simple, basic. It's basically it's just a brick. Anyways, so how do you paint a brick? Well, you divide the light shapes from the shadow shapes, and then you start to see the subtle variations of color and value that are placed in the brick. And if I saw a color, I just threw it in there. Parts of it with the palette knife, some parts with the paintbrush to describe the forms. And it's really not, I don't know, it's not that difficult as long as you're comparing everything in relationship to each other. Now here in this back persimmon, you can see that it's much darker in value. It's kind of back in the shadows. And so I had to compress the values, or maybe mix a dark value orange, about value 4, maybe 3 of the oranges. And then you have the value 1 in the blacks that are in the back behind the persimmon. But it tends to be darker in value, and so students will make things a little too light in value. They'll treat every single shape the same within the painting, and that's not a very good thing. But anyways, so here I have finished the major proportions and shapes of all of the pomegranates and persimmons and the brick. And this is about a total of 5 hours worth of work. And I go in and after the painting is dry, I start to paint in the background because there's a specific shape and that I want to support the foreground objects, that nice little triangle shadow shape that's back there. That's a part of the composition, and I want it to indicate the various shapes that are in the foreground and focus on those shapes in the foreground. So I had to wait until the first layer was cured or dry so that I could paint the background in there because it was slipping and sliding everywhere. And once it was dry, I was able to go in and paint a second layer. I didn't like the shape of that persimmon, so I recreated the shape of that persimmon and also the cast shadow that was behind the pomegranate. Man, it's good stuff. Okay, so start simple or general and move to specific shapes. Beyond that, I mean, what else do you need to know? I hope this time-lapse video was informative for you. If not, I'm sorry, that just sucks. But anyways, have a great day.